Okay, so if you have your can open and you want to save a copy because we're about to make some changes, with the part open, you simply just go to File, Save As, and just give it a new name. So in this case, I'll just add a 3. I will say I noticed, I don't know if we talked about this, but the naming convention you all used is perfectly great. You know, you can get in the habit of naming your parts either your initials or your name, whatever you want, NW underscore. It is helpful to have, I think, what project it's for somewhere in here. So you could always end with like P1 and then like the date. Really, the critical information is your name. You're all smart. You figured that out. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so save as, you have your new part here. So I am going to ask us to back up a little bit. Again, we didn't formally get into revolve last time. The last sheet that I handed out really only took us up and through the tracing of the can. So with your copy, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and in your tree here, if you did have a revolve, to select this. I believe you can right-click and hit delete. For Mac users, for some strange reason, the delete key doesn't, or backspace key doesn't work in SolidWorks. I believe F12 is also delete, so you can try that if you're a Mac user. Or simply right-click and delete the revolve command. I believe if you... We did not talk about master sketches last time, so I'm going to guess your tree is going to look something similar to this, where you have the image of the can followed by the sketch of the can, the trace of it. Some of you may have a rectangle sketch above this. I think I was talking to some of you and you didn't reorient your sketch. That's okay. What I'm going to invite you to do is to go ahead and edit the trace of your can. And you'll see with mine, I've already kind of messed with this a little bit. And this is what the demo asks you to do. What is this start at? 4.8. Some of you may have dimensioned it to this level. Some of you may have not. Again, I'm assuming everyone's at a slightly different level, background of detail. But if I'm deleting all of my dimensions, so I'm assuming this is the bare minimum of what some of you have, right? So again, this asks you to trace the can. So let me just look at some details that I did here. For example, I have this line here. What is this line called when it's dotted, or this line here? Construction line. Any guesses like what purpose this one is serving? Why would I have this one in here? So it doesn't do the tangency, but it aligns the arc. I think that's kind of what you meant. Like it controls the arc to be a perfect half circle. It aligns the top of the arc with the bottom of the arc vertically, is maybe the way I would state that. And it does that by, if I click on this line, it says it's vertical. And I believe this arc, this midpoint, I believe is coincidency here. Or it might just be that there's two different ways to do this. And again, that's like back to this sheet where it had the sketches. There were two different ways to achieve the D here. One way was to make this arc tangent to this line, or the other way was to make the center of the arc coincident to this construction line. Either one works. Different paths to the same end goal. So that's, I mean, this is essentially that D sketch right here. So that's why that line is in there. But you'll notice right now, because it's blue, these are fully like, I can drag these, right? And now let's imagine, so you see there's this tall can here. If I just draw a line, I think I can get a quick measurement on here. If I just click on the line, it should tell me, I think. So if I click on this line on the left here, I can see it's 6.2 inches tall. So if I change this here to 6.2, so let's say like, again, the scenario is I'm working for a client. They want two versions of the can, a short one and a tall one. I go to change this. You'll notice my proportion now changes because it's not defined. So that's what the first part of the sheet invites you to do. It says update your sketch with dimensions and construction lines and relations to make it so that if you adjust any of these dimensions, the proportion and the edge of the can will look the same. And it gives you some suggestions here on what you can do. So to do that, to bring up the dimension tool, you simply hit D. Oops, I hit S, sorry. You hit D, it's the hotkeys to bring up the Smart Dimension tool, or you find the tab up here. And for example, I can dimension this line by simply clicking on it and dragging it out to the side. So now the height of this lip is fixed. Maybe I want to dimension how far this line is from the edge. Now here's a very common mistake and something that's easy to be confused. And maybe I'll phrase it as a question. Would it be better for me to define how wide this lip is from the center or from the edge here? Any guesses? Imagine I want to change the width of this eventually. Maybe I want a fatter can. From the edge, yeah. It's a little confusing. I feel like the gut sense would be to define it from the center. But what happens if I do that, and now let's say the design, we need to change this and make a wider can. Now we have this really weird bevel because this has been fixed. So part of knowing how to dimension a sketch, it just kind of comes with experience and trial and error, which I know is a really annoying answer. But it also comes from just like planning and knowing what you may want to do eventually. So if we know that the can may need to get wider, if we dimension it from the widest edge, when I change this number to a 2, the proportion of the edge stays the same. It moves with everything. So you kind of, and again, this is day 1, we did that Jenga tower. This is like, how do you set up your tower? In this case, it's just a sketch at this point. How do you plan your sketch in such a way that the changes won't make the sketch fail or make the design change too much? And my main advice to you is, if there's any edge detail, so anything going down the side of your object, you should all have a bottle today too. So if you have this design, chances are you want to dimension it from the widest point of the object. And you'll notice here that the widest point of the object is a construction line. Again, that's also intentional because this is just, it's kind of controlling it's controlling our widest point. And it gives us a line to like attach things to kind of build on. Does this make sense to everybody so far? Okay. Now you'll notice that this is still blue. So one way to figure out why something's blue is to click and drag on it. So I'm dragging in a circle, and you'll notice it's only moving up and down. So that tells me that the vertical is what's not defined. Again, there's 2 ways to do this. Any suggestions what one of the 2 ways are, how to make this not blue anymore? Yeah, from where? Yeah, from this top line. So again, the way that the dimension command works, if I hit D, it brings it up. You'll notice if I click on this line, it wants to give me this dimension. But now if I click on this point here, it now jumps to give me this dimension. So that's kind of maybe a confusing thing, but good to be aware of. I'll do that again in case anyone missed it. When you dimension something, if you click a whole line, the default is to give you that line. But if you click on another object, like this point, it'll give you the distance from that line. Great, that's one way. What's another way that's less obscure and has not been talked about yet? Any guesses? I'll give you all the answer. It's dimensioning the angle. So if I select this line and this line, I don't blame you for not getting it. I haven't told you that it's possible to do this yet. Oops, didn't let me select that. Let's try that again. If you hit dimension tool and select this line followed by this line, you'll get an angle. And now this angle's fixed, and that kind of inherently defines where this point is. There is there is some geometry in SOLIDWORks, and sometimes it can be a bit confusing, but you can also kind of find your way through it. Okay, so there's different ways to do that. Bottom's the same. I'm worried that I've already bored you all, so it's dimensioning it. Dimensioning to the edge is important. Just like we dimension to the top, this highest point up here, on the bottom, the same thing. I would dimension to the lowest point here to get this height fixed in. And now, when we change the can, so again, the way you change the dimension, I believe you can click on it once and it should bring this box up, or you can double click, but it should allow you to punch the numbers in whatever you want. If it doesn't come up, you can double click on it. And now we have a can that's slightly wider, taller, longer. Are there any questions on any of this so far? Yeah, Armando. So yeah, again, to just reiterate, if you angle to the outside of the line, it doesn't matter. Outside, inside, it's the same. Great question. Are there any other questions about this? Cool. The most important thing, why it's important to dimension it properly so you can scale it up and down easily. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to set this back to where it belongs. So 1.3, 4.8. Now, actually, while we're here, I'm going to talk about what's going to happen on Monday. So all of you should have a bottle, and at a quick glance, I think most of you do. This bottle that you brought in, it's going to be part of Project One. Project One has two components to it. One of it is tracing an existing bottle, and the other one is designing a new bottle. You're essentially building two bottles in SOLIDWORKS, but the goal is to set it up in a smart way, similar to this can, that you can take that one bottle and get a half size and a double size out of it. So you're going to have a total of 6 models for Project One. It's really just 2 different sketches that you'll be able to get 3 models out of each sketch, if that makes sense. So on Monday is the first check-in for Project One. Your homework, and again, I'm hoping to give you time today in class. And sorry, we're not quite done with this demo yet. I just want to take this opportunity looking at the sketch to talk about what the goal is. I'm hoping to give you some time in class today to start tracing your bottle like this. What's going to happen on Monday is the goal is to design a very robust sketch of your bottle. On Monday, each of you are going to have the opportunity to recommend a change that the whole class has to make, including yourself. We'll figure out the details later in terms of like the order we're going to go. Again, I'm calling it like SOLIDWORKS Simon Says. So for example, if I were to go first, I would say, okay, I'm going to make my bottle 0.2 inches wider. And then all of you need to then go in to SOLIDWORKS, find your widest point and say 1.5 and make that change. And we're going to keep stacking those changes. There's a couple more options to go through, but I just want to throw that out there that that's kind of the initial goal. Someone might say, I realize everyone's bottle is going to be different. Again, I'll talk about some consistencies throughout the bottles that we'll see. It's a little bit different from a can to a bottle. It kind of fits into the design aspect of this class, beyond the SOLIDWORKS aspect. But you might say, like, I want to make the top portion taller by an inch, so 1.6. Now the goal is hopefully that your bottle is going to be robust enough to stand up with all the changes you all suggest. If you're not able to make a change, no harm, no foul. It's a way to test your object. It's supposed to be fun. I'm sorry if it's not. But it's a way to stack these changes, and basically it's kind of like may the strongest bottle win. If hopefully, I don't know if there's going to be one last person standing who's able to make all the changes, or maybe you'll all happily surprise me and it'll be all 11, 12 of you that do that. The carrot that I'm going to hang out for this on Monday, the main carrot is that it's just a way to check your work. It's a way to get feedback, make sure you're on the right path. If you are successful on Monday, then you basically have half the project done. Congratulations. But if you're able to make all 11 or 12 changes, I'll give you a half point extra credit on Project One, and that will be like a tying aspect. So whoever, again, I'll give you the final details, but right now in my head I'm thinking if you're able to make all the changes and your object does not fail, and failing would be like there's an error or the design like completely changes or looks wonky, again, within reason, depending on what the changes are. If you're able to make all 12 changes, you'll get a half point extra credit. Cool. So that's what we're working towards. Any questions on where we're going? Awesome. Again, I'll touch back on that later in class. So let me exit out of this. All right. So the next part of this demo, sorry. Whoops, I exited out too soon, my bad. So, that's worth mentioning too, sorry, is if you hit this red X and you do it too soon, it won't save your work. So be sure to, if you exit out, to hit the blue arrow, and that will save your work that you've done. Okay, so once you have your sketch set up in a way that you like, this is the next stage. And this is where it might seem a little bit, there's an extra step in here that might be a bit confusing. It's step number 2. So we've exited the sketch. We know we're out of the sketch because this is gray. This asks you to make a new sketch. So we select the front plane to do that and hit Alt-S, or again, select the sketch thing up here. And what we're going to do, it's a new command. It's called convert entities. It's the hotkey C as in convert. And what you're going to do is you're going to select your can sketch that you just made here, and you're going to press C. And you'll notice that all these lines, non-construction lines, only regular lines, come through and get copied into this new sketch. This is a new habit that I want you all to get into, and this is something that was not mentioned last time, so this is brand new to everybody. And I'll explain why in a minute. So basically, let me convert entities. What it does is basically a fancy copying tool. What's fancy about it is that it has a memory. Whatever you copied from with convert entities, if the original sketch changes, the copy will also change. So they're linked together. That's what convert entities does. This is the new sketch that I invite you all now to make a feature out of. So again, if you click on your features tab here, you'll see some options. Extrude, we talked about on day one. If I click on it, it just simply takes the sketch and makes it like Play-Doh. It just pushes it out of that shape. But for project one, we're all doing revolve bottles, or we should be. In which case, we're going to select the revolve feature. Now, features work, as we mentioned at the beginning of class, a feature is built from what? Sketch. Yeah, I'm being repetitive. And a pain in the ass, I know. It's built from Sketch. Because we're already in Sketch World and we're editing this sketch, simply by clicking a feature, SolidWorks says, you're in a sketch and now you want to make a feature. I'm assuming you want to use the sketch that you're in. That's the assumption that it makes. So by doing that, it won't give you any errors. It'll just simply bring up the feature here. Now, let's say I'm outside of the sketch, right? I know I'm outside because it's gray. This icon's not here. If I now click revolve, SolidWorks is going to say, wait a minute, what do you want to do? I don't know what you want to revolve. It's asking, this message here is prompting me to either pick a sketch or pick a plane for which to make the sketch from. So if I need to click a sketch, I can simply, you'll notice the tree is gone now. If you click this arrow here, you can get like a view of the tree to the right of the property box. I believe if I simply select sketch 3, it now knows which sketch I want to use. Does that distinction and nuance make sense to everybody? I'm seeing some blank blinks. I'll state it again as clearly as I can. I mean, I realize this is like a really annoying nuance in SolidWorks. When you create a feature, it has to be paired with a sketch. So if you are just not inside of a sketch, you're outside of Sketch World, you're in the right side up, and you want to make a feature, it asks you, hey, what sketch do you want to base this off of? You can either create a new sketch. It gives you two options here. Select a plane to make a new sketch, or select an existing sketch. The way that I advise you select an existing sketch is to click this little arrow here to bring the tree down, and simply pick the sketch that you want to make the feature from, and then it goes to the feature property dialog. More often than not, though, the chances are you will already be working on a sketch when you decide you want to make it a feature. So right now I'm in Sketch World. I know that I'm there because of the icons here and because the lines are black and this is highlighted in blue. Now simply if I click on the revolve feature, it immediately knows I want to use this sketch. Now when a feature appears over here, these are the properties of the feature. Anything that's in blue, that's highlighted in blue, it's kind of a question. It's asking you to fill in the blank. So in this instance, it's asking you for what the axis of revolution is. Where do you want to revolve the object around? Simply by clicking this center line here, it picks that center line and now the can pops. If you selected the wrong thing, you can select this and hit delete. Or wait, let's see, am I able to pick a different line? You can simply just pick a different line. You don't have to hit delete. So you can see if I select any of these different ones, different shapes appear. So you simply select the middle line and click check. And there you have it. Now you have a can. Now just to break down what we're looking at, you'll notice that with this revolve, the feature, it like consumes the sketch. The sketch gets kind of filed underneath the feature in the tree. So we created this new sketch, sketch 3. That was the convert entities. It's now part of this sketch here, or sorry, part of this feature here. It kind of hides it just for kind of visual clarity. That way you know what sketch the feature is based off of. The new thing that I mentioned is the convert entities. This original sketch here, this is known as a master sketch. This is a SolidWorks workflow technique that a lot of places use, a lot of people use. It's just a common sort of language or approach that it makes it easy to work on different people's files. It's a way to quickly edit a file. So if someone now had to come in here and edit the can, they could simply come, they would probably look for your master sketch at the top. Obviously, this is a very simple tree. Some trees get incredibly long. A robust master sketch, you can come in here, open it up. Again, to use my example before, maybe this time we're making a smaller can for an airplane, one of those like tiny little, I guess that doesn't happen anymore, does it? Baby cans. You edit these, you exit the sketch, and because you use convert entities, it points to it, and it rebuilds. So something like this would be very successful for Monday's sort of, test of the model. Does this make sense to everybody? Are there any questions on anything? Yeah, so in terms of like efficiency and workflow, okay, so for this kind of project and this test, or whatever, this kind of trial on Monday, having it fully dimensioned is probably a good thing, but it's not always necessary. So I'll be honest with you all, you could probably get away without like some of these. And you'll see, it depends what your goal is. Again, for this project, it's a little bit nitpicky, so I advise you to try and dimension as much as possible, but sometimes dimensioning can be problematic. I mean, so like I just deleted 2 of my dimensions here. Yeah, okay, never mind, that failed. So yeah, like you want to avoid things like that happening. Depending on what you're doing and what your goal is, you can get away with fewer dimensions, and that would be faster. For this project, though, it is focused on being nuanced. Maybe something faster than dimensions are things like using, if you have this horizontal line, so let's say I'm recreating this top part, being aware that the tangent arc exists, that saves you a step. I don't know why that came out backwards. So this came in built in with a tangency. Knowing that you have like a line like coming across like this. Now, it's also worth mentioning that if you take time, so this line came in with a rule of horizontal. It's worth mentioning that if you take time with your master sketch, while it might feel a bit slow, it'll make your life down the road easier. It's kind of like an early investment in time for a later savings in time, is the way I would describe it. Right now, it definitely feels, I can imagine it feels like an extra step, especially to copy the sketch. Oh, shoot. I didn't mean to do that. I blew this up. Control Z works in SolidWorks to some degree. There you go. It feels like an extra step to copy the sketch, but in the long run, it's a good habit to get into. With a tree this short, if you're building it for yourself, you probably don't need to do a master sketch. For my class and for your habit, you absolutely need one. And in fact, you will lose points. If you do not take this step and separate these 2 sketches, you'll lose points. So what that looks like, imagine I didn't take that step. It would simply be just like maybe you're in here, you forget to do the copies, sketch entities. You're working, it's 1 a.m. before the project's due on Monday. Whoops, I selected sweep, not revolve. Revolve, check. Okay, if it's Monday, it's okay, you're fine, you're not gonna lose points. But if this is the project that's due and this is what I see, this is just a reference sketch, it's not a master sketch. Here you've actually used the master sketch in a feature. So that's something you want to just get out of the habit from doing. If I use the analogy from day 1 on the Jenga tower, the master sketch is what you all built in terms of like a very loose physical analogy on day 1. That kind of shelf to hold the Jenga pieces as you move them, this master sketch, this is kind of like the skeleton of the structure you're building. It's something that everything points to. And it'll make sense over time, hopefully. Good question though, Daisy. Any other questions?